Okay, everyone, welcome back to my channel, Mormonism with the Murph, where we do a fair and objective analysis of the church and its truth claims, its history, doctrine, and policy. So this is part two of me and Dan Vogel having a really interesting and good discussion about Joseph Smith and his involvement in magic, treasure, seer stones. We've been talking about the gold plates and the angel and the accounts of a lot of people. So go back and watch part one if you haven't. But in part two, we're going to talk a little bit about how the Book of Mormon was translated, some of the accounts of some of the eyewitnesses, and was it the seer stone to use that the whole time? Some people claim it was a Urim Thummim as well. So we're going to maybe dive into that. So that he gets the plates in 1827, and when does he begin translation?
Well, he can't do any translating, as I mentioned, in Manchester because of the money diggers keep hounding his house and trying to get the plates. So they make a deal with Isaac Hale to go down to Harmony, Pennsylvania, and start writing or translating down there. So Martin Harris doesn't begin as scribe really until February 1828. But it appears that a little bit of translating was done prior to his becoming the main translator. We're talking about the manuscript that is eventually lost. What they call the 116 pages. We don't know really how long it was.
Right.
The 116 pages, they got the number from the original manuscript, so like that's where Mosiah starts, So basically that's where they get the 116 page deal. The replacement took that much time, that much space, but it could have been longer. So we have Martin Harris. When Joseph Smith goes down to Harmony, Pennsylvania, his brother-in-law came up, Alva Hale, picked him up, he and Emma, and took him back to Harmony, Pennsylvania, and they get a house and 13 acres of land. To eventually they own it. So Joseph Smith might have been translating a little with Emma as the scribe before Harris got there.
I actually thought Emma would have been after Martin Harris. I thought maybe between the transition between Martin and when he got a replacement scribe, but you're saying Emma before.
That's another time that Emma could have been, but
Okay.
I say it was probably during this time because she is the one that Joseph Smith said to Emma, "Does Jerusalem have a wall?"
Ah, okay.
And
Where's
he
that
goes, "Yes."
referenced?
Oh, who? I think it's Alma. A reorganized guy. It's mentioned in two places. It might have been David Whitmer. David Whitmer mentions it, but he doesn't say it was said to Emma. But it has to be said to Emma because I don't think he would do that twice.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Right. So David Whitmer gives that account that Joseph Smith didn't even know Jerusalem had a wall around it. But the one that attributes it to Emma is a reorganized guy, almost somebody.
And would this be the start of the Book of Mormon, or I mean, would this be in Mosiah then, or you think it's
No,
referenced
the Jerusalem having walls would be the story of Nephi.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah.
Going back, and he says he left his brothers outside the walls.
That's right. Okay.
And so that's the time when Jerusalem's mentioned as having walls in the replacement text.
Mm-hmm.
First Nephi. Joseph Smith would be translating first the book of Lehi. the 116 pages is
Yeah.
lost. And according to what Nephi says later in the replacement text, this would be the book of Lehi from the plates of Nephi.
Right.
And so what happens is that it gets replaced in the first 10 chapters of First Nephi, or basically that recounting that in kind of information about Lehi and his dream and leaving and his vision of God telling him that Jerusalem's going to be destroyed. And so and Nephi calls it an abridgment of my father's record. Now, the lost plates of Nephi would not, I mean, the book of Lehi would have been written not in first person. It is Mormon's
No.
abridgment.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So it was Mormon's abridgment of the plates of Lehi. So it would be third person, just like the rest of the Mosiah on. So it matched, right? Up, it would have the same kind of reading as the early parts of the Mosiah would have. It would be more less prophetic. Nephi's replacement text is very prophetic and very scriptural, and but from Mosiah on, from Mormon's abridgment, it's religious, but it's a lot secular, a lot just a story of the nation.
Yeah.
Not prophetic, and not, it has King Benjamin's speech in there, but it's King Benjamin's speech is more of it has religion in it, but it's more of a civil, civic duties also in there about what good citizens do and things like that in King Benjamin's speech. And so it's kind of sort of a social kind of gospel going on there, rather than like a sermon. It's a king's speech. It's not really a sermon. It's information he said he got from a vision of an angel towards the second half of his speech. But so even the replacement text tells us that the book of Lehi, Mormon's original book of Lehi, was originally less religious and more secular.
Mm-hmm.
The kings, you probably have kings going king by king by king, which is not repeated in the replacement text. But it's more of the reign of the kings, Nephi, and
They're all named after Nephi, aren't they?
well,
And
yeah. So Joseph Smith probably couldn't remember all those kings.
right, okay.
Replacing the text. So that's what happens. Nephi the second, and so on and so forth. So, but the first one probably had a list of kings, sort of like the beginning of the Book of Ether has the list of kings first, and then it goes story by story, following that chronology. So, so anyway, that text has been lost to us, but it would have been Emma probably as the first scribe while Martin Harris was gone on his trip to New York to talk to various scholars about the characters that Joseph Smith copied off the plates.
Right. It's
So
the
he
Anthon
probably,
transcripts.
yeah, he at this point, early translating period, he probably did sit behind a curtain. He had to take the plates behind the curtain, copied the characters off of the plates, hand the characters to whoever on the other side of the curtain. So the reason why I say this is because when Martin Harris gets to Professor Anthon, he tells Professor Anthon that Joseph Smith is behind a curtain. And that's where Anthon says, tell the guy behind the curtain, that, I'll translate him or whatever, or bring him here. So yeah, Anthon in his 1834 letter to E.D. Howe describes his interaction with Martin Harris.
Don't they have conflicting accounts, Charles Anthon and Martin, about what was said and
Well,
their interpretation?
all we have is Martin Harris gave accounts later, but those accounts are sort of influenced by the history of the church account. And the history of the church account is not accurate. So Joseph Smith says Martin Harris's story goes like this, and gives Martin Harris's account. When Joseph Smith gives this, Martin Harris isn't a member of the church. He's gone. And so what Joseph Smith represents Martin Harris's story as has, in my analysis, been changed. And this is how. When the earliest accounts have Martin Harris coming back from his encounter with Professor Anthon, saying that Joseph Smith is smarter than Professor Anthon, because Joseph Smith could translate the characters and Anthon could not. So why did Martin Harris go? He went to authenticate the characters. Martin Harris actually isn't the brightest of witnesses, really. He thinks 65 or 60 pounds of whatever is underneath the cloth must be gold or lead. Well, gold and lead weigh way more than that. He also thinks, well, I took Joseph Smith aside and his story matched everyone else's, so it must be true. This just doesn't follow. They all got their stories from Joseph Smith. So how does Joseph Smith's story matching everybody else's make it true? I don't understand Martin Harris's logic.
Right.
So he's not the smartest guy in my book.
Isn't there a account where doesn't he state that Anthon confirms that they're genuine characters in one of his account, and then he wants to read the book, and Martin says, well, they're sealed, and then he says, I can't read a sealed book, and then he talks that they were delivered by an angel, and then he tears up a letter. Am I remembering that right?
Yeah. Now, your picture is frozen, but I can hear you, so I'm going to keep talking.
Oh, let me see if I can fix that.
I look like I'm okay, but I'll keep talking, maybe to catch up with us here. So the early account is that Anthon cannot read the writing. He can verify the writing, probably, that he thinks that it represents various alphabets, as he later says to Edie Howe. But the 1838 account has Anthon being able to translate it and verify the translation. So if he can verify the translation, and we know he can't not read the writing. He cannot verify whether it is a true translation or not, because nobody else can. And there we are.
Yep, back.
Continuing with Anthon, right?
Yes.
So the 1838 account has Anthon being able to verify Joseph Smith's translation, but we know he can't. He never could. And Martin Harris never came back and said that Anthon had verified the translation. So what happened between the early accounts in early 1830s and 1838? The Book of Abraham. So Joseph Smith needs evidence, or wants evidence, that he can translate ancient languages. And when he gets the Book of Abraham papyri, the account of that, acquiring those from Michael Chandler, that's who he bought him from.
Yeah.
Is in the the Messenger and Advocate, December 1835 issue. And that Cowdery gives an account in there, and it's a letter actually written to some guy, and he publishes it in the Messenger and Advocate. But in there, he talks about how when Joseph Smith and Michael Chandler met, Joseph Smith showed Chandler a specimen of the Book of Mormon characters that were similar to the Egyptian characters on the papyri. And Cowdery was very keen in there to mention and provide documents from Chandler, a statement from Chandler, that Joseph Smith gave us a translation, a small translation of the papyri, and that it had more or less been verified or matched all the things that he could learn about the papyri back east from the learned. So what they're trying to use the papyri as, and they're trying to get Chandler to verify, is that Joseph Smith could translate Egyptian on these papyri, and it was verified by the learned back east, although they couldn't translate it. Nobody could translate it anyway. And that because the characters on the papyri are similar to the Book of Mormon, that means he could translate those Book of Mormon characters too. So he's getting testimony. This is what psychics type people like this always are conscious of, trying to gather these kinds of evidences, testimonials to their gifts, or if it's like patent medicine, they get those testimonials for that eventually. People even write them up, So they're very conscious of that. And so when he goes to tell the Anthon story, he continues along that same kind of thought. He gets Anthon to verify his translation, and which we know he can't do. And he denied doing that, and he said, well, he said some of the characters were real, because copied out of some book, probably mixed in with some naturalistic moon shapes and whatever shapes of things, which the Egyptian does. But and we don't know what he really showed, because the one that we have is written horizontally. He says they were written in columns with a circle on it. He may have seen something else, or he could this could be part of it, or it could have been copied off of it, or it's just another version of it, or some of it could be sideways, some of it could be in columns, in a circle. Like I imagine that would be the title page, with the seal, some kind of magic seal on it to protect it.
Do we have a copy? Does the church have a copy of the the characters that he that was delivered to Charles Anthon by Martin Harris, or is it a copy
No.
of them?
Yeah. Well, we don't have. Well, Anthon described what he remembered seeing. There's another testimony, forget who it was, but they said that on it was concentric circles, much like Anthon had said. And they said this, I believe it was before Anthon even said anything publicly. So we don't have the original, but we have a copy made probably by Christian Whitmer. The copy that everyone sees that was published in Mormon periodicals, and so even back east, that has horizontal, there's like 226 characters, individual characters, and it's pretty famous. Most people, most of the viewers probably already seen it. I do a study on it on my channel about how I think it was created, making things up using numbers and alphabets, and then evolving, even taking those and evolving them into different shapes. And so I did a little study of it, how I think it could be contrived on the spot. And it was copied by Christian Whitmer from some place. We believe it was Christian Whitmer because on the top it says characters, misspelt, but it says characters, and that handwriting matches specimens of Christian Whitmer's writing. So, and my friend Brent Madcalf and his wife Erin discovered that. They're the ones that discovered that. So recently, we only had like a little strip, and I've seen it personally, and it's your Community of Christ has it, and they allowed me to examine it. I mean, it's only a slip of paper, but it was torn off a larger piece. And recently, within the last 3 or 4 years, we got a photograph that somebody made when it was still attached to a larger piece of paper. And somebody like nailed it onto a board so that they can take a photograph, old-fashioned photograph. It was black and white, done around, in the 1900s sometime, or 1800s, excuse me, 1800s, it looks like. And it has the bottom part and has writing, something about the Book of Adam and things like that. And we figured out probably what it pertained to, and that it was actually a copy and not the one taken to Professor Anthon, because it was later. And at any rate, the characters were copied and published during Joseph Smith's lifetime as the Book of Mormon characters. So there's no question that these are associated with the Book of Mormon characters somehow. If Anthon could not have said these were translated correctly and verified Joseph Smith's translation of the Anthon transcript, then it's not the story Martin Harris told when he came back. It verified that there were characters, real characters, that Anthon couldn't translate. Therefore, you needed the gift of God to translate it.
Right.
No, they're real characters. The learned can't translate it, but Joseph Smith can through the gift of God. So
he's got the gift as a prophet and a translator.
Right. And so that's how Martin Harris interpreted it. To him, it was good evidence.
Mm-hmm.
He was encouraged to
so you're saying Charles Anthon, he couldn't have, to him they seemed like real characters, but he couldn't translate them. Nobody could translate them at the time. Well, to match Joseph Smith's translation, that he's doing it correctly. Is that what you're trying to say?
Right. He couldn't verify Joseph Smith didn't send a translation with it, probably. Even if he did, Anthon couldn't verify it's the most correct translation I've ever seen. What? No, Anthon didn't say that. So in the Book of Mormon, in 2nd Nephi, Isaiah 29 is quoted. Mm-hmm. The words of the book are taken to the learned, and they can't read the book. They say, I cannot read the book. Right?
Yeah, can't read a sealed book.
Then it's taken to the unlearned, and the learned said, I am unlearned. So,
which would be reference to Joseph Smith. He would.
That's how it's interpreted. Now, really good scholars, Mormon scholars, even know that Isaiah wasn't prophesying in the Book of Mormon. Nephi, he put their explanation would be that Nephi put his interpolation on it back then, and then Joseph Smith translated that. So whereas I would say, well, Joseph Smith just transformed a Bible prophecy to give biblical proof for his book. But
right.
Anyway, so in Nephi, the learned cannot read it either. That's so So Anthon not being able to read it is fulfillment. That's how Isaiah was fulfilled, because he couldn't read it.
Oh, I see. So that would have
But
strengthened the
yeah,
claim for Martin then.
right.
Right. Okay.
So when Joe Smith changes the story to make Anthon verify his gift, he has to fulfill Isaiah in a different way. He can't say the learner can't read it. Now that the learner can read it, how does he have Anthon fulfill Isaiah? He puts Isaiah's exact words into Anthon's mouth. I can't I can't bring the record, Martin Harris says, because it's sealed. And Anthon says, I can't read a sealed book. Well, that doesn't make any sense. You know, I can't bring the book. Bring the book. I'll translate it. Well, he never said that either, right? He never said, "Oh, bring the book." He might have told Martin Harris, "Look under into the sack. I'll take this curse on myself." Remember? That's what he
Mm-hmm.
said. I'll take the curse on myself. You look, and I'll take the curse on myself. He might have said that, but he didn't say, "Oh, bring the book. I'll translate it," because he's seen looking at the writing, can't translate it.
Right. Oh,
So,
yeah.
so why is he going to say, "Bring the book"? I'll translate it.
If you can't translate.
And he says, "I can't bring the book. It's sealed," meaning not sealed physically, sealed from the view of outsiders.
God, yeah.
So the translation is sealed also, according to Ether. The physical sealing of the plates is something that was made up by the witnesses. There's no physical sealing. That's how they saw it in their vision, maybe, you know.
Okay.
But in the Book of Mormon itself, sealing is, I seal it up unto the Lord, Moroni says, you know, when he's
Right. Yeah.
burying them. Or Ether says, and the interpretation thereof is sealed. It's the interpretation that's sealed. And that's why you need the spectacles.
Right.
Translate them because the interpretation's sealed. Well, that would fit with Martin Harris showing the characters. It's they're real characters and they're sealed from the learned. If they don't have the spectacles, they can't translate them. The spectacles were made just to translate these things because no one knoweth our language. That's what the book itself says.
Right. So
You know,
nobody could translate them without the
no,
spectacles.
that's the whole deal.
Right. Okay.
But Joseph Smith changes that in his history of the church, and now he puts very awkwardly, he puts the exact words from Isaiah into Anthon's mouth. You know, I can't read it. Well, I can't read a sealed book. You know, well, he could have said, "Well, I'll read the part that isn't sealed." you
Oh,
know.
yeah. Okay. That makes sense. So I've heard some maybe apologist historians claim that during the 106, so during the Book of Mormon as we have it, he used the seer stone, but they claim that at the beginning with Martin Harris that he was using the spectacles and the breastplate.
Oh,
Is there documentation for that?
that's what William Smith.
William Smith. Okay,
William Smith, he gives this elaborate story about sitting there with the spectacles on connected to the breastplate. That's all fiction.
of Joseph Smith. Okay.
It's total fiction. Any account, even Oliver Cowdery's accounts that Joseph Smith used the spectacles or the interpreters, as the Nephites called them, to translate the Book of Mormon is fiction. He did not use he did not use the spectacles to translate the Book of Mormon as we have it now. He didn't even probably use it for the majority of the lost 116-page manuscript. He may have used them behind the curtain, right? When he was
When Martin couldn't see, when there was the
right.
curtain between. Okay.
Well, there was no curtain between Martin Harris and or with the Whitmers or any no curtain between Emma Smith either. The only time the curtain is ever mentioned is by Anthon,
Oh, okay.
and Martin Harris is visiting Anthon before he even was a scribe,
Oh,
right? So when he's telling Anthony, oh, he's behind the curtain, he went behind the curtain, he copied these things. Well, because nobody could see the plates, and that's the only way to copy them is not to let anybody see the plates. So he has to be behind a curtain or out of sight or some sort of thing. But he wants him to know that I'm copying out the plates right now, carefully copying them, and gives them to Martin Harris. So, of course, that's behind the curtain. But whenever Martin Harris talks about himself acting as a scribe, it's always the stone in the hat.
That's right. And there's an account of him swapping the stone for another stone as well during the translation process, which shows that he was using the Seer stone.
Which was another opportunity for Joseph Smith. Okay. It was another opportunity because he stares at this stone for years, as a seer, as a money digger. He carries this thing around in his pocket. He knows what it looks like. He knows Martin Harris switched them. He wasn't even looking at the stone when he picked the stone out there on the stream.
Right. So in your view, Joseph Smith was on to him and he could tell straight away it wasn't a stone.
Superior knowledge. And Martin Harris, like I said, not the sharpest tool in the shed. Okay. He was fooled by Joseph Smith because he thought he was the most clever guy around. And that's what undid him. That's where the psychics get people. That's where the con artists get people. When people think that they can't be fooled. Even magicians can be fooled. I mean, if you watch Penn and Teller, on Fool Us, if you get that over there, or you can watch it on YouTube, Penn and Teller.
I've never seen it.
A show called Fool Us. They're professional magicians, like in Las Vegas right now. I think they're still in Las Vegas, but they have a brand of magic that is dark, and they'll use fake blood and things like that just to creep people up, bugs and things. Well, but they're very good, very knowledgeable, very smart magicians, and they'll sit there. And Teller's the big guy that talks boisterously, and Teller's the quiet, short guy that doesn't talk at all. He's mute. He just uses sign language and stuff and pantomimes magic. Well, so they've been a couple for a long time doing magic, and it's called Fool Us. And they have magicians come on. They're like in Vegas, and they sit there back, like judges. And the magicians will come on and perform a trick, and Penn and Teller will have to tell them if they have figured it out or not. And they'll use code language that if you're a magician, you know exactly what they're talking about when they're using the code language, but non-magicians don't. And you're going, well, that's probably how they did it. Or sometimes I can figure it out too, but sometimes I can't. Sometimes they can't, and they're magicians, and they get fooled. So magicians can get fooled, and the danger is when you think you never can be fooled.
Right.
I can't be fooled. Whatever. That's not true. You can be fooled. There's some very clever people out there, and you can't be fooled all the time. And not every trick is, that wonderful. But every now and then there's somebody that's just so clever. It's unbelievable how. And there's people that are actually designers of tricks, that they make their living just designing tricks for other magicians.
Right.
They are so clever. So at any rate, Martin Harris was one of those kinds that didn't think he could be fooled. And
that was kind of like a test
on a regular basis.
Doesn't say the test if Joseph Smith was just sort of memorizing the lines. Like it was a test he did to check that. But you're saying that in your view, Joseph Smith could tell he swapped the stones and he was just playing along.
He swapped the stone. He had no choice but to play along. Well, it was to his advantage, but what else could he do? So he played along and looked in there, and he didn't start talking. And then he looked up and says, what's wrong? Everything is as dark as Egypt, Martin. And then Martin's face betrayed him. And then he confessed he had switched the stones. Well, yeah, so Joseph got another witness. This is a story that was handed down by him and say, see, I wasn't a fool. I have plenty of evidence.
Yeah. And there's accounts of I believe David Whitmer and Emma about him, putting his face in the hat, at the stone, trying to block out the light. And is it David Whitmer that says like the spiritual light would shine? He would sort of read
Yeah.
the words as they appeared.
Well, it was yeah, David Whitmer said this, a screen appeared. And
A
on
screen.
it, yeah, the characters, one character or one character at a time. And sometimes it would be one word or a sentence. So
Mm-hmm.
he had he knew Reformed Egyptian was condensed, that's
Yes.
that's what the Book of Mormon says itself, and that ties in with the Book of Abraham when they go, how can one character give you a paragraph? Well, this is how it's condensed.
So it
It's
could fit on the plates.
yeah, or
Right.
else they would have written in Hebrew,
Uh-huh.
but they couldn't write in Hebrew. They wrote in Reformed Egyptian uh, because it takes less space. So uh, on this, David Whitmer said he would see a screen. Well, I think this story kind of might be tied to D&C 7, where in April 1829, Joseph Smith and Albert Cowdery are arguing, and it could be an Alma, where Alma gets translated into heaven, Alma the Senior,
Mm-hmm.
and he gets translated into heaven like Moses, and how they had a dispute among themselves about John, the beloved.
Yes.
Whether he's still alive or not. What does it mean in the last chapters of John, chapter 21, I think it is, in the Gospel of John, and where Jesus says to Peter, what is it to thee if this John follows me, or tarries until I return? What is it to you? Follow me, meaning follow me in death. And so it's kind of unclear. And even in John, it says, and the word goes around in the church that uh, John is alive, or so. I forget how it's worded, but anyway, they had a dispute. Robert Cowdery obviously was the one saying that he died because Joseph Smith always wins, and so it gets answered eventually in Third Nephi when the three Nephites want the same thing, as if they knew, um, how they knew, I didn't know, but they wanted to, three Nephites wanted to tarry. But in June 1829, they hadn't reached Third Nephi yet. So there was a dispute between them about
Mm.
probably the whole idea of people being translated. And Joseph Smith probably says, well, what about John? If you have a problem with Alma, well, what about John? And so they started arguing about that. And then Joseph Smith takes out his stone, puts it in his hat, starts dictating a short revelation, which is now D&C 7. That is a translation of a document that was hidden up in a cave back in Palestine. A short document from the John that he translates and verifies that John is still alive. It's more clear
Right.
than the Gospel of John. It's similar, but more clear to the Gospel of John. So um,
Gotcha.
that was a parchment. He probably saw the parchment
Mm-hmm.
with the writing and the translation underneath, like a interlinear Bible. You know what I mean? Characters and translation underneath, and
Right.
and that might have influenced David Whitmer to talk about this parchment with writing on it or something. Now the glowing letters, that's more like Joseph Knight Sr.'s history, where they're written in shining Roman letters.
Yeah, I remember reading that.
Yeah. So it's supposed to be, yeah, the rock and the darkness, the spiritual light shines. How the spiritual light needs physical darkness, is kind of how it's in a physically dark place. What does that have to do with spiritual light shining? Anyway,
As it's not stating physical, like, because I suppose the analogy people would tend to give is
yeah,
like
like
if it's a
physical
really
light.
sunny day and you have your phone, you kind of
Yeah,
need to cover it
like
in
to
order to
compare it
read.
to your phone. Yeah. Remember
Hmm.
that one guy, I forget his name. Brad, somebody. Anyway,
Wilcox, is it?
yeah, yeah, Brad Wilcox and the phone analogy.
Yeah.
Well, it's a rock. It's an ordinary rock. There's nothing special about it. But a lot of people, if they're nuanced and sophisticated, would say it had nothing to do with the rock. The rock was just a focal point, something Joseph Smith and his culture believed would work that way. So God used that and
Yeah.
made it work through that cultural mechanism.
Yeah. I've heard that
Yeah,
apologetic.
yeah. I think it's just a rock, but if if there is a God, it could work that way. I mean,
Yeah.
if you believe like Christians, well, so you can get Christians into what is called an ad hominem circumstantial argument. Ad hominem abusive is, oh, you're stupid. You know what I mean? That's an abusive ad hominem, right?
Yeah.
Oh, you're dumb or whatever. But an ad hominem circumstantial argument is uh, say well, you would say, well, you're Mormon, of course you would argue that way. So it's your circumstances
Mm.
that I'm going to ignore your argument, right, and just say, attack you, it's you, and say, of course you're a Mormon, you would argue that way.
Yeah.
And
To to
that's a
defend
taking
your
advantage
position.
of your position,
I suppose I
uh,
remember me and my wife having this discussion, and if you believe in, say, like if you believe in the resurrection that Jesus died and rose again, that's a very supernatural. Some people would say that's impossible. So that if you believe in that, then why not believe in a seer stone and that God could, if God can raise someone from the dead, why couldn't he, speak to Joseph Smith through a stone and reveal the Book of
right.
Mormon? And it's similar.
That's my friend Mike Quinn just pushed it into, if you believe in miracles, I mean, what about the Bible's full of all sorts of miracles
Mhm.
that are impossible, that the fish multiplying or bread multiplying, the water turning to wine,
Yeah, impossible things.
walking on water, communicating through a stone. It's just a matter of faith.
Yeah,
So you
exactly.
can't just like categorically, I mean, either you believe in the supernatural or you don't.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that even if the supernatural is real, even if you could prove the supernatural real, it wouldn't mean that every claim of it is
Is
true.
yes. Yeah. That's all.
Okay,
Yeah. Good
so
point.
you know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah. I
there
agree
could
with
be
you there.
it could be real, but then there could be other claims. So you would be a believer in the supernatural, but you wouldn't necessarily believe that every faith healer has the gift of healing.
No. Yeah.
You would say some of those guys are false, and they've been proven false. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? So you wouldn't be locked into accepting somebody. And Joseph Smith did do that kind of argument. Uh, if you believe that in God of miracles, is God could be doing miracles now.
Hmm.
But he would take that would be to him an argument of circumstantial against Christians, saying, Christians, if you believe in miracles, why are you persecuting me for claiming that I have revelations and miracles happen?
Yeah.
So that is an argument circumstantial that Mormon apologists use against Christians that they can't use against me. So
That's right.
the fact that they can't use it against me shows that it's an argument circumstantial, because you're taking advantage of the Christian's position, right?
Right. Yeah.
Or else that argument wouldn't go over. But all of Mormonism is geared to convert the sectarian Christians into Mormonism.
Yeah. That
To
argument
tap
wouldn't
into
work.
that market.
It wouldn't work with a naturalist, someone who doesn't believe in
Right. But
in
it's
the
not geared
supernatural.
towards me.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't gear it towards me necessarily. He mostly geared it towards deists who denied miracles
Yeah.
altogether, and other Christians that would reject him and reject the Book of Mormon and his revelations.
Mm-hmm.
Why are you rejecting my revelations? You believe in ancient prophets. Why can't there be prophets now? God is the same today, yesterday, and forever. Hebrews,
Mm-hmm.
that would be, and so that's why I say Joseph Smith was the first Mormon apologist. The whole thing was built on counter Christian apologetics, because he wanted to tap into that.
Right. That's interesting. Okay. So with with the Book of Mormon translation, so Martin Harris, he wants to, or he asked Joseph to borrow the 116 pages. Is it to show to his wife, because his wife isn't happy that he's investing so much time and money into this project? And I believe, as the account goes, Joseph says he inquires of the Lord, he's told twice no, and then Martin keeps pushing, so then he prays again, third time he says yes, and then the manuscript goes missing. We don't know if she burns it or if it gets stolen. We don't know what happens to it.
Right.
And
Well, I think it was burnt.
Right.
Martin Harris's wife took it, probably, or somebody associated with her. Lucy thought it was her son-in-law. But
and then you have Doctrine
she
and
had no
Covenants
reason
3.
to hang on. She had no reason to hang on to it. She wanted to stop Martin Harris. She didn't want to prove Joseph Smith a false prophet. She wanted to stop Martin Harris's involvement so he wouldn't forfeit his property or money or time.
Yeah.
So she did want to expose him when they went down there, when she ransacked the house looking for the plates. Right.
Oh, okay.
She ransacked the house trying to say, oh, I want to see those plates. Let's see those plates. And of course, she can never find. They had to move them out of the house, I think, into the woods. So she was trying to do that. But once there was a manuscript and there was a prospect of publishing on the horizon, she wanted to stop that. She didn't want to lose her property or money. And burning the manuscript would do it. She didn't want to alter it, because of course, like we discussed, there's no way to alter it that you couldn't be uncovered, and
I'd be
you have to
obvious.
actually show people, here's the manuscript, and what, you're going to erase ink somehow and rewrite change parts or alter it somehow to prove that Joseph Smith can't translate the same over again? Well, we know he couldn't, because he was kind of making it up as he's going. Well, he felt inspired while he was dictating.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that.
Like a patriarch, the words are partially supplied by him, and God is leading him, and he's inspired. So like a patriarch, not word for word. He believes it's he's working it out in his mind.
Do you believe he's doing that at the time, or do you think he's doing that outside
he's
of when
done
he's
it
dictating?
over. Yeah, he did it over the years. That's why he could never replicate that something on the size of the Book of Mormon, because he had years to do it.
Right.
It's sort of like when a band makes their first album, and they took years to create it, actually, even though they got famous all of a sudden, and they make the album, and then the company says, well, do another one. And they're like, and you only have like the Beatles, they were geniuses though, but you only have a few months to do it or whatever, you know. um, they did it, but a lot of bands crumble at that point. And so just was the same way. He like had years to think about this and to create it, uh, and I believe he felt inspired about the whole project, about him dictating the book, about God is telling him that this is the way to do it by doing. I think he prayed, asked yes or no, sought a burning in the bosom. Should I do this book? I think I can do this. And he's practicing, and he's telling stories, and he's keeping people involved, and he's answering questions that his family has, and it's doing good, and the family's becoming united around him. And he prays, should he take this next step? And he gets a burning in the bosom each time. Each step,
Right.
little increments along the way. And I think at first, I think he's reading the book in the hill, from the hill in his stone. And then he realizes he probably needs actual book. And then he gets the actual book, but then he reverts back to, even though he had to have the spectacles for a while because that was a requirement, because Lawrence made that a requirement of coming out with the plates. So he gets that, he uses them briefly and discards them and goes back to his old method, which is putting the stone in the hat, like money digging. But I think
Yes.
he was dictating revelation type things, or reading the book, put it that way. He doesn't really start his first revelations deals with the crisis of losing the 116 pages, and that is another step he takes in his evolution. But at this time, I think when Lucy says he's describing the Nephite, or the Nephites, as if he lived among them and all that, and giving all these names out and describing, and very realistically, I think he's doing it with the stone in the hat, not just sitting there with the family and talking. What is he talking? Where is he getting this information? He's not talking to the angel every day. He has to wait another year before he sees the angel.
Right.
Where is he getting this information? Well, he is not just making it up. He isn't just looking up and seeing it. He's tied to the stone still. He doesn't become free from the stone until much later in his evolution.
Uh-huh.
So I believe he's describing these Nephites because he's translating parts of this book and the book's still in the hill.
In 1823.
Yeah, like as if he did, just like he was doing with D&C 7.
Okay.
Translating that document when it's still in Palestine in a cave, right? And he sees the writing and the translation underneath, and that's where he's getting his practice. He's doing it with his family until Alvin dies, and then after a while they have to give that up. But he's still thinking about that. And I think he gives it up. He gives it up for a while. And the book, when he's dictating the book, it's about religion, but it's mostly about the Nephites and their culture who happen to be religious. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's not a book of religion. It's not like Nephi and his prophecies and doctrines and things like that. It's a book about a family like his that are religious, and it solves his family problems. It isn't until he dictates it, and he starts dictating longer. And then Jesus isn't planned to come to America when he starts. It eventually evolves, and Jesus comes and becomes more and more religious, and he sees how much influence he's having with people around him, and especially far away, from Cowdery, from the Whitmers are Cowdery's writing to the Whitmers, and Whitmers are very involved with it.
Is that how
And
Cowdery hears of the Book of Mormon translation? Is it from the Whitmers?
from the Smith family.
Oh, from the Smith family.
Oliver Cowdery moved in with the Smiths while Joseph Smith was down dictating the Book of Mormon, or he was in between actually. Martin Harris. Martin Harris had lost 116 pages, and around July of 1828, discontinued the whole thing's, or June, right before his birth of his first child that died.
Doesn't Joseph Smith say that so he stopped translating for a season? Am I remember right to Doctrine and Covenants 3? He says like reporting this came from the angel and the revelation. He kind of gets rebuked for giving into like the persuasions of men, and giving the 116 pages to Martin. And doesn't it say that he's lost his gift for a season or something like that, but God's work will still go forth? So according to Joseph Smith and that revelation, that it's almost like a period of you could say punishment a little bit, or consequences, and he has to wait a few months or however long it wasn't before he could start translating again.
Yes. So you have the problem with deity giving in to a human, asking him 3 times, like as if God is going to be swayed to change his mind. So there's that problem kind of intertwined into that story of
I suppose a believer might see it as God's teaching him a lesson that you should have listened the first time, and he just condoned
it becomes a lesson.
Yeah.
Smith learned himself and won't ever repeat.
Yeah.
So he does get reprimanded in D&C 3, and does talk about, it gives you a little overview of what the book is really about the different tribes, the Nephites, and also the various tribes.
Do you not find it interesting?
Their demise. So he knows how the book ends even before he resumes.
Do you not find it interesting, Dan, that if you don't believe Joseph Smith is a prophet, or if you believe he's either a fraud or a pious fraud, do you not think it's interesting in D&C 3 that he's getting like quite severely rebuked by God? I find that kind of interesting, that because you might point to other revelations where maybe he's being very highly blessed, but he's getting very severely rebuked in that section. I just find it quite interesting if he's not a true prophet, if he's a deceiver, he's kind of putting himself in a bad light, unless he's bit of self-hatred with himself. I suppose you could say maybe that's manifested, but it's interesting that the tone of that revelation.
In my view, he is sincere.
Yeah.
And he believes the words he's dictating are inspired.
Mm-hmm.
But he doesn't have any plates, and no Nephite, because the Nephites don't exist, no Nephite came back and talked to him.
Actually, you believe no angel Moroni.
No plates. There's no. How can there be a Moroni? There could have been a guardian spirit kind of a thing, but I don't think he saw anything. That's just part of the pious fraud part. But he does feel inspired when he's dictating, and he was sincere, I think, when he lost the 116 pages. He probably got a burning in the bosom the 3rd time. And let Martin Harris have them, but it was all a mistake. Remember, one of the early revelations says this, but David Whitmer's more famous for this quote, which was dealing with the Canadian revelation. In March 1830, around there, Joe Smith wanted to be free from Martin Harris's the debt he owed Martin for selling the books of Mormon, and paying him back for the $3,000 Martin Harris put up and by mortgaging his farm. And he wanted to be free of Martin Harris from the debt he owed, and probably the leverage Martin still had because of that. So he sent some Oliver Cowdery and others, Hiram Page, to Canada to sell the Canadian or foreign copyright of the Book of Mormon. And he had a revelation saying that they, more or less implying that they would be successful, but there was that little out that had a conditional thing in there that the apologists try to use. But Joseph sent them up there by revelation to sell the copyright, but they went to the wrong place. That's the deal. That they didn't sell copyrights in Kingston, Canada. David Whitmer thought it was Toronto, but it was Kingston. And they came back as a failure. And when Joe Smith was trying to publish his revelations in 1831, David Whitmer said, well, are you going to publish all of them? And this revelation is actually in that Book of Revelations and Commandments manuscript book, the very first manuscript book of Joe Smith's Revelations. It's in there.
That's not the same as the Book of Commandments, no? That's
No.
different. Okay.
This the Book of Revelations and Commandments. It's a manuscript book, mostly written in John Whitmer's handwriting, who copied in the individual revelations into this book that he took to Independence, Missouri, to publish the Book of Commandments with. And they only picked out certain ones, and they started editing the revelations in this book. And the Canadian Revelation, anyway, is in there. For years, people like Joseph Fielding Smith Jr. denied its existence, and that was all David Whitmer. He's one of those apostate, lying apostates.
A traitor.
Yeah, you can't believe anything he's saying, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But then there it was all the time. And we only recently because of the Joe Smith papers, got a hold of the manuscript Revelation book. And there it was. And so David Whitmer was right, but he got the place wrong. And the thing David Whitmer said in his pamphlet was, he said to Joseph, are you going to publish all the revelations? And Joseph says, why, you ask? And he says, well, are you going to publish the Canadian Revelation? And Joseph says, no. And then David Whitmer said, why? He goes, because it's not true. And Joseph Smith explained that the reason for that was because some revelation is of God, some revelations of the devil, and some revelations of man. And then he left it for Whitmer and others to decide which
it was when it wasn't fulfilled.
Yeah, right. So, and that's what exactly, and that little phrase in a different kind of structure is in one of the revelations, early revelations, that very kind of concept. Well, and so the early Mormons didn't believe in this, what is called plenary revelation, which is God speaking directly and the prophet repeating the exact words. That they believe more in like a conceptual revelation, that the concepts flowed and the revelator had to
put it in his own words.
Put in his own words, the best language that he could command, or probably maybe even a little better from being under inspiration. But it was still his personality and not the concepts, but the expression, the words and the structure and things like that were Joseph Smith's. And that's why Isaiah sounds different than Ezekiel and so on and so forth. But so
would they believe the same with the Book of Mormon translation, or just as his revelations?
Yeah, they would think that the stone operated mechanically, though. But Joseph Smith, in dictating the revelations, because he said it was a revelation, not a translation, even if it came through the stone, right? It's not a translation of an ancient book. It was a revelation to go to Canada. So it was a revelation even if you were looking at the stone. It wouldn't
Right.
be words because it's not a translation. Um, the stone would be only be like an aid to get a revelation, but he wasn't reading uh, uh, one of his revelations from the stone. That's only took place when he was translating. So
With the early converts and believe would they have considered it to be like a tight translation that Joseph Smith is reading it word for word from the stone, like how David Whitmer
well,
suggests, or do you think
well,
that was just David Whitmer?
David Whitmer did say that sometimes one character would be a sentence. So he has he knows that it's more or less word for word, like a interlinear Bible or New Testament,
Mm-hmm.
where you have the Greek and the English underneath.
Yeah.
Uh, and it's sort of like that's how David Whitmer imagined it. And David Whitmer, some people don't realize this, but they try to say, oh, the witnesses were only guessing. They couldn't see in the stone, so they didn't know how it worked. Well, in a couple of David Whitmer's statements, he says, or at least Joseph Smith said so.
Yeah, I was about to ask that. Is he getting this from how Joseph Smith is telling him
Right,
how he
because
was
he's not
translating it?
looking in himself. I mean, Martin Harris, I think it was Martin Harris. At one time, he said he was afraid to look because he would want to see God, and he knew that no man could see God and live, so he didn't want to look. And
Okay.
other times, they said they looked but couldn't see anything, or that was maybe David Whitmer. Somebody said they looked but couldn't see anything in it. It didn't work for them. You had to have the gift.
Yeah, he wasn't the seer.
And, yeah, and David Whitmer made it clear that Joseph Smith couldn't always translate just automatically. I mean, it worked kind of mechanically, but he had to be in the right spiritual frame of mind. And that one time he had argued with Emma in the morning, and when he
Hmm.
went to translate it, nothing would happen. So he had to go out to the woods to pray to get right.
Yeah, I remember that account. So he had to be in the right sort of spiritual frame
Yeah,
of mind and yeah,
I would
spiritually right.
tend to agree. I mean, if I get in an argument, I can't write either.
Yeah, yeah, too
I'm not
much
as creative.
emotions.
I'm not as creative. Yeah, it's a too fast of a change.
Yeah. Okay. So after the last 116 pages, they take a break for a few months from translating. Martin Harris is no longer the scribe, and then Oliver Cowdery comes. He's heard from the Smiths about the translation of the Book of Mormon, and does he then take over? I believe maybe Emma might, if there's a gap, maybe do a little bit, but does Oliver then take over as the principal scribe then for the rest of the Book of Mormon?
Yeah, well, in the original manuscript, there are a few little things that Royal Skousen found of Joseph Smith's own handwriting in a few
Oh, that's
couple
interesting.
or couple of places. Um, of the original manuscript, yeah, we have several handwritings, not just Oliver Cowdery's, which helps us date parts because John Whitmer becomes one of the principal scribes in the early portions of First Nephi, Second Nephi. Then there's some unknown scribes, and but John Whitmer, that means that the first part of the Book of Mormon was saved to do at the end. Well, when Joseph Smith moved from Harmony to Fayette, New York, at the beginning of June of 1829. But Martin Harris was like from February to March, and if it were 116 pages, it was around 5-6 pages per day average. Um, when you get to the book of the proper Book of Mormon that we have in the number of pages, I'm going by first edition, 588 pages.
Why is it in the current editions? Is it 530 or something like that?
I don't know,
Okay, but
but
it was
the
580.
original's larger, right?
Okay.
Larger, 588, and that's an average of about 8 pages a day.
Hmm.
It's not arduous or anything. It could be 16 pages a day and none another day, and 3 one day and 5, whatever he felt inspired to do, and
And it was
what
over what,
circumstances allowed.
85 days, 3-month period roughly with him and Oliver.
75, I think it was, or it depends on how you calculate it, but they started dictating with Oliver Cowdery on April 7th. He arrived on the 5th, I believe it was, a few days later. He starts as scribe. Now, where did they start in the Book of Mormon? So that's going to go into your calculation also. But so the lost 116 pages, they're written in signatures of something like 16 pages, 8 pages folded, 16 pages or something like that. And so Martin Harris took a group of signatures, and there was a little part left, probably, of Mosiah. So it would be the Book of Lehi, right? And maybe some others after Lehi that we don't know about. But it would be parts, it would be Mormon's abridgment of Lehi, and maybe some other people that, like Benjamin, the Book of Benjamin, And so where did he stop? And he may have retained some on a new signature. And Martin Harris took a group to read to his wife just to prove that something's getting done. And look how wonderful this book is. Don't try to stop the production of this book, right? Look at this. No way could Joseph Smith, that farm boy, be dictating that, making this up. He probably said all that stuff. It didn't do anything to convince his wife, or anyone else in his family ever joined, or the people he read it to, most of them remained disbelievers, put it that way. So, Martin Harris, he may have dictated some parts to Emma and Reuben Hale, Emma's
Joseph.
brother. Yeah, Joseph dictated parts. It would have been small. Reuben Hale may have even been part of that 116 pages. No, we don't know exactly where he fit in. But somebody claimed he was a scribe. And so I believe before Oliver Cowdery came, Emma was a scribe. And she actually wrote down the speech of King Benjamin. And there was a message in it just for her. Okay. And that message was, infants that die before they're baptized are saved in Christ. And Emma, as you recall, that the translating had halted when Emma gave birth to her firstborn, which died very shortly after birth. And they named Alvin. And this was June 18th, 1828, and they buried the infant in the cemetery. It was badly deformed, according to a woman that helped as the midwife in the neighborhood. And Joe Smith could see that tombstone from his translating room. And the cemetery is like right next door to their house, practically a little ways away. And It just says infant son without a name, but that was just before she gave birth is when Martin Harris left with the manuscript. So it took a while to recover from all of that. And the loss of Joe Smith hung around taking care of Emma and couldn't go. Well, he was expecting Martin Harris back, but Martin Harris never came. Then Joe Smith had to make the trip himself. I think it was around January, because that's when he confronted Abner Cole in the printing shop. And Martin Harris confessed to him. Martin Harris was mortified and that he had lost the manuscript. And Joe Smith just crumbled. I mean, I think it legitimately. That was a horrible loss probably for him.
Yeah.
And in my view, he believed it was an inspired book, and he was commanded by God to do it. That's what I believe.
Mm-hmm.
The commandment to do this project, even though it sometimes involved deception. He believed that God sometimes inspires deception.
Yeah,
And
like the ends justify the means again.
Well, his own the D&C 19, which was Joe Smith dictated in March of 1830 to Martin Harris about Martin Harris, commanding Martin Harris to finance the Book of Mormon to pay the printer. But it begins by talking about eternal damnation and salvation. And Martin Harris is a universalist of the restoration of variety, which means there's ultra universalists who believe that no one goes to hell, everyone's saved immediately after death. And then there's the restorationist universalists who believe that sinners will go to hell into a temporary hell and pay their penance, and then after they pay the last farthing, that's one of the scriptures they like to use, they're let out and they're saved also. Universal salvation. So Martin Harris was of that second variety, and this revelation said that the scriptures talk about eternal damnation and endless torment, but it doesn't mean that there's no end to this suffering, because
God's name
is eternal.
Yeah, so it's God's suffering, it's God's
name
punishment.
is endless. Yeah, so it's actually a synonym for God, not a description, not an adjective, it's a noun. And so it says that that the scriptures use this language in order that it might work upon the hearts of the children of men. Then it says,
cause a little bit more fear of the eternal consequences.
God is going to make you believe that you're going to be damned for eternity for your own good.
Right.
That it
so
would
that you'll repent and keep the commandments.
You repent. So it said, but you still, so Joe Smith didn't have the 3 degrees of heaven or 3 heaven concept where everyone is saved except for sons of perdition. Everyone is saved.
And there's no mention of that in the Book of Mormon.
No, Joe Smith doesn't have a revelation about this until 1832. So this revelation finally talks about everyone is basically saved, but there's still an incentive to be good. And the Book of Mormon talks about universalists, ultra universalists mostly. It also talks about restorationists, those who will be beaten with a few stripes, but at last shall enter into heaven. Well, eat, drink, and be merry. The Book of Alma talks about that with his son Coriantumr, and so the Book of Mormon condemns it uh, because people will use it as an excuse and perish. They'll go, oh well, it doesn't matter what you do if you're going to be saved, right? So there's no incentive to be good. If everyone's going to be saved, and so God's commandments are not obeyed. But in this revelation, this March 1830 revelation, D&C 19, given to Martin Harris, it tries to give an incentive by saying that, well, the temporary suffering is so bad that you want to avoid it anyway. It says, for I, God, have suffered these things for all, that they might not suffer if they would repent. But if they would not repent, they must suffer even as I, which is a chiasmus, by the way.
Okay.
That's how I remember it. That's how I remember it.
Does it say like which suffering caused me, even God, like the greatest of all pain, to tremble?
Yeah, it goes on to say that.
To bleed from every pore. Yeah.
Yeah. In the Garden of Gethsemane.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. So the chiasmus, behold, I, God, have suffered these things for all, that they might not suffer if they would repent. But if they would not repent, they must suffer even as I. So
they're still suffering if you don't repent. Oh,
yeah. Which suffering was so bad that even I, God, trembled and bled at every pore. So that's what it's talking about. It's trying to scare people. Then after that, it goes on to tell Martin Harris that this is meat, not milk, right? Do not publicize this revelation, because people will use it as an excuse and perish. So yeah, it was a revelation that specifically said to keep it out of the eyes of the public, which some of these revelations did say that, which was one reason some people objected to them being published.
Right.
David Whitmer thinking
they weren't meant to be public.
Well, that was one of David Whitmer's reasons also, but not just because one of them was that he knew didn't come to pass.
Right.
He also objected because he, in his view, all sorts of people were getting revelations. Why are your revelations getting published and not anyone else's? He said there was people that got revelations and prophesied the things that came to pass, just every bit as good as Joseph Smith's. And of course, David Whitmer went on to become a leader of his own church and to dictate revelations himself also later in life. Well, that one book, that manuscript Revelation book that we were just mentioning, that had the Canadian Revelation in it, also has a revelation of Oliver Cowdery in it. And it's another fascinating story that ties in with Joseph Smith's struggle to keep control, be the leader of the church, and to put Oliver Cowdery in his place. And it has a lot to do with who are apostles and who are not apostles. So we'll maybe talk about that some other time.
Well, I think that's a really good overview and summary of the Book of Mormon translation. I would like to bring up, before we close, maybe a couple of maybe arguments posed by some apologists. There's this, I think, this branch of church members, apologists. I believe they're associated with the Joseph Smith Foundation.
Yeah,
it's not the Stoddards.
That's the ones I was referring to.
Yeah, you referenced them.
They have this real simple, purist view of things, and they'll deny everything and make it the official story, no matter what.
Yes, I had a bit of a discussion slash debate with a woman, but because the church wasn't really.
Her name? Do you remember her name?
No, I don't remember her name. I don't remember. I think I kept her name.
Stoddard.
She wasn't the one I had the discussion with it, but it was someone who probably is associated with her. But yeah, Hannah Stoddard. I think I listened to her I haven't read her book, but I listened to some of her podcasts.
I had a comments on one of her videos, and we went back and forth, and some others back and forth about the Hurlbut affidavits and whether the Smiths were lazy or not, um, and she was quoting Don Enders about the property and how great the Smith property was, and that proves that they weren't lazy. And so I tried to say that Enders was using records that date to 1830, and the Smiths had lost the property in 1825. They were no longer owners of that property, and they were living.
Oh.
They were still living there as renters, and so naturally they lost interest in the property. It wasn't theirs anymore, and they probably focused on a smaller area of providing for themselves and maybe a little bit more. So anyway, we went around about that, and how in the perception of the neighbors, the Smiths may have been lazy, and because they were involved with idle activities like money digging. And these guys are puritanical. They come from a Puritan heritage, Presbyterian and puritanical, and they have this work ethic and work. And so they were judging the Smiths by this, but by no means was Joseph Smith lazy. He just didn't like being a farmer, but he worked really hard. My reading of his life was he worked really hard at being the Mormon leader.
Yeah.
That was not a lazy performance.
No,
okay,
I can't imagine him having much free time between
right.
everything that was going on.
So of course his neighbors were all successful. They didn't lose their farms, right? So their farms flourished. The Smiths lost theirs, and the Stoddard apologist types say, well, they got swindled out of the property. But that's another story too, that it's not so clear that they were swindled. Lucy makes it sound like they were swindled out of it, but at the time they lost it. They were on the verge of losing it anyway, because they had to make the final payment. They couldn't make the final payment. Alvin had died. He was the mainstay of the farm. And frankly, to tell you the truth, Joe Smith Sr. had a drinking problem. And he was a shadowy kind of a husband father figure. Not This is where Hiram eventually, Joe Smith Sr. gave him a patriarchal blessing and blessed him for not scorning his father for drinking.
Oh,
That
okay.
he didn't, he did
That's
not
specific.
when Joe Smith Sr. said that you had not abandoned your father when he was out of the way through wine. And drinking is what all the neighbors testify, that Joe Smith Sr. had this drinking problem. And even their closest friends, and like the Saunders family, were very sympathetic friends of the Smiths, and talked about Joe Smith Sr. drinking, having on occasion he would get drunk, and they would tease him about certain things, and he would go around, and he would be drunk at public gatherings. And they used to sell roots and herbs and things, they like root beer, kind of dandelion beer, or some sort of kind of beer,
Mhm.
and sell wares like Lucy would paint doilies or whatever, and they would sell them at when they would have in the village some kind of activity, community activities. And Joseph Sr. would go around putting magic hexes on the people's locks so they couldn't shoot the turkeys. That's what um, Lorenzo Sanders said, and he was one of those happy kind of drunk kind of people, I guess. But of course, this is before the word of wisdom,
Mm-hmm.
and there was no reason why he couldn't be. But um, so the family had, like a lot of families had some dysfunctions, and some people try to paint the Smiths as this ideal family that had
Yeah,
no
perfect
problem.
Mormon family. Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
well, of today, maybe, some of them at
yeah,
least. But lots of families struggle, and they certainly
yeah.
don't clean their or air their laundry in public. And that's the way it's unspoken law. You don't talk about family problems and
Mm-hmm.
in public. And people put on those things. We all know from the internet, everybody's life on the internet, most people's anyway, is all this shiny, perfect life.
Yeah.
You know, on the internet, they give that impression. You
So of
know,
course, when you're going to write your history, you're going to write the things that reflect best of you and leave out the things that don't look so good. I think they would tend to point to, because the church didn't really acknowledge until, yeah, I think there's the odd reference here or there, but it wasn't really till 2015 that they publicly release the Seer Stone, and sort of publicly acknowledged that Joseph Smith used the Seer Stone. He was involved in treasure digging. This is how he translated the Book of Mormon. I know there's probably the odd reference, but before then, I think the general understanding of members of the church was it was the
yeah.
Urim and Thummim, or the spectacles. And I think the Stoddards, I think it's the implications if you use that same Seer Stone in treasure digging, and if you consider that fraudulent, or he was conning people through that method, does that call into question, can we trust him when it comes to the Book of Mormon translation? Does that call
Yeah,
into
well,
question his credibility? And I think,
if he couldn't find treasure with it, how can he translate with it?
mhm,
And there is that problem, but maybe it didn't have anything to do with the stone anyway. But um, the stone's just a prop. Um, it's not a magical object. Neither were the Urim and Thummim couldn't be a magical object either. I mean, these are stories, faith promoting stories. Um, do they have to be true to do the job? You know, Jonah and the whale. I mean, it's a faith promoting story that I don't think anyone really believes, except really, really fundamentalist Christians might have odd stories of someone temporarily being swallowed for a little second or so, coming
hmm,
out, coming out. Those stories are passed around. But um, does the Smith family have to be this shining, perfect family for Joseph Smith to be a true prophet? No, I
no,
don't think so.
no,
So actually, when you look at the types of people that are tuned into the kinds of things that activities that prophets do, they're not really very stable people to begin with. You know what I mean? Like, the prophets aren't known to be uh, rigid. I mean, that was one of the things that Joe Smith used to contrast himself with Hiram, the stuffy Presbyterian type. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Uh, and Joseph Smith, the gregarious kind of outgoing, loose kind of personality,
hmm,
creative, and that's what you need. But usually, those people that found religions have a hard time stabilizing it. Joseph Smith was pretty good in starting to build this institution that kept on, that was self-perpetuating, right?
hmm,
Um, Usually, so when Joseph Smith dies, then Brigham Young takes over, and he's kind of, could Joseph Smith could never, he had a hard time hard time actually building these communities when he gets around to it. That's one of the things Oliver Cowdery noticed and feared when Joseph Smith moved to Missouri. Like, he ruined Kirtland. Now he's coming here. Who knows what it would only be time, he wrote back to his brothers in Kirtland. It'd only be time before the same foolishness that was going on in Kirtland is going to destroy this place too. That's what he said.
Right.
So he wasn't looking forward to Joe Smith coming and taking over the operations in Missouri. But that's the personality that founds religions,
Mm-hmm.
the charismatic type personality. They have a hard time stabilizing it. And that took more of a Brigham Young,
Yeah. Yeah.
to do that. And so Brigham Young was probably the right person in the place. He had a little bit of charismatic, but not too
He was a
much.
strong leader.
He was pragmatic
Yeah.
About when it came to building actual cities and colonies and settlements. He
Mm-hmm.
probably was more practical about that. He wasn't trying to, he didn't introduce things like the Danites or, what I mean? Like, that would probably disrupt it too much.
Yeah.
If he did it, it was like not, it didn't disrupt it, the runnings of it
Yeah.
too much. Not he'd be just as erratic as probably the founders of the Puritan colonies. But Joe Smith had a way of, because he was so revolutionary, in his views and expansive, and that his way of going about it was impractical because it was too visionary. That's what my book's about, basically. My next book is about Joseph Smith. They have no money, but he commands people to build the Kirtland Temple. But he only says he's going to stay there for 5 years. Kirtland's going to be a stronghold for 5 years until 1836, and then he starts this huge project of building a temple and soaking all the money into it. And not only one, he wants three. One for the presidency, printing, and worshiping. And then he sends the same instructions to Missouri and tells them they have to build three. And
it's a lot of temples.
There's just no way they are financially capable of doing that. But he's trying to demand people to donate, The one problem, the one fatal mistake Joe Smith made in 1831 was to point out an exact location where the temple was going to be built and the city Zion is going to be built by revelation. He didn't just introduce the concept of Zion and said we need to build a society like this wherever we can, preferably where there was no one else living.
Yeah, he declared the location.
Yeah, well, the first outlandish thing was way back in New York. He said the temple would be built among the Lamanites in Indian territory. Well, that totally failed. But that was before he had gone there and pointed out another spot himself. So they got kicked out of Indian territory. That was a dead end there. He found a place. Now by remote viewing, he should have been able to point out the spot without leaving Ohio. But no, he had to go there in person. It couldn't be revealed until he was actually there in person surveying the area himself. And they found this spot and he pointed it out, and they wrote Zohar carved it into this tree to mark the spot, even though they hadn't owned it yet exactly. They were kind of squatting on it in a way. And back then you can do that because it was preemption rights. Nobody actually had rights to the land. They were waiting for the government to release it. But if they squatted on the land first, they had obviously the first rights to the land. And so it was a big rush between the Mormons and Gentiles of who can squat on the most land. And and they were doing that. They were out there, Joseph Smith and Sherwood, I believe his name was, the surveyor, and out there like going around. And it is actually Oliver Cowdery and that went out and started surveying an area, especially for far west. And anyway, so that's when they left Independent. They got kicked out of Independence to Clay County, and then they went to what became Caldwell County. But they were trying to grab up all the land they could and have these preemption rights on it. But in Independence, they got this lot of land, and they eventually got it from this guy. It was like a mile outside of Independence Village, and they dedicated it, the exact spot. And Joseph did not count on the determination of the non-Mormons to hang on to their land that they have already had dibs on, and their families, and then inheritances for their kids and buildings, and they're developing their land. And then these Mormon fanatical people move into their area and start trying to take it over. And not only that, they're saying, hey, God has given us this land, you might as well leave.
Yeah, they wouldn't be happy about that.
Would you? That some because to outsiders, Mormons look fanatical, and even to modern Mormons, original Mormons looked awful fanatical compared to modern Mormons, I'll tell you. But speaking in tongues, thinking that tongues, this is revelations of God, and they were using tongues to get revelations about what was going to happen with Zion and the Gentiles there. And they were scared because the Indians are like right there. And the Book of Mormon predicts the Indians will rise up against the unbelieving Gentiles. So, and some Mormons were up there, preaching that this is the very thing that will happen. So these people are scared out of their minds. It's either them or the Mormons, and they were determined it wasn't going to be them that left.
Yeah.
But they didn't count on the Mormons, how strong revelation, the spot in the city pointed out by Revelation, tied in with the Book of Mormon, would make them non-negotiable. Like they couldn't negotiate with these guys.
Yeah, that's the place.
They couldn't buy them out.
Yeah.
Because it was a denial of the faith. If a Mormon sold their property to a Gentile, even after they got kicked out, Joseph Smith said, not 1 foot will be sold to the Gentiles. And Oliver Cowdery and them got excommunicated because they decided to sell their property. And it wasn't very many months after that Joseph Smith reversed the whole thing and sold church property and Independence. So
okay.
After these guys get excommunicated, but there was other reasons they got excommunicated. It's quite an interesting story all on its own.
Yeah.
Power struggle between the leaders.
Yeah. Very good. In closing, Dan, I would just like to maybe bring up a couple of things with apologetics.
Go ahead.
So yeah,
I try to give short answers.
Yeah. So with the Stoddard, one thing that I found very surprising is, so they would say, Joseph Smith in his history, he didn't talk about the Seer stone. Oliver Cowdery, who was the principal scribe, didn't talk about the Seer stone. The Lord in the Doctrine and Covenants says it was the Urim Thummim. I think it was Joseph Fielding Smith, who was, apostle, past prophet, historian, who denied the Seer stone accounts, that these are all hearsay, that they're, from the neighbors who were antagonistic towards the Smith, but they're all just uncredible sources. And but I remember thinking that I probably would have accepted that video, but then I was thinking back, what about these quotes from Emma? What about these quotes from David Whitmer, Martin Harris, Joseph Knight Sr., who are sort of witnesses of the translation? You know, they were around, they were faithful sources, even if they later maybe left the church, like Martin Harris or David Whitmer, but they still believed the Book of Mormon translation was miraculous, that it was of God. How could you just say that they're lying or they're not credible? And I just, it, you have to deny so much history to hold that
Yeah,
view.
that's multiple witnesses.
Yeah, that
And
are
they're
faithful.
not in collusion in any way. They're all estranged from the church. They're not communicating with each other. They
Hmm.
all come up with the same story.
Yeah,
Okay, so
and they're not
uh,
trying to discredit
and you get
Joseph.
Mormons and non-Mormons.
Hmm.
You get Isaac Hale said the same thing,
Yeah.
uh, that he walked in and the hat thing was going on, and so did Michael Morris, which is a guy that married one of Emma Smith's sisters,
Hmm.
uh, and so it's and you got David Whitmer, you got um, uh, Elizabeth Ann Whitmer, the sister, David Whitmer's sister that Cowdery eventually married. So you have Cowdery's wife saying it's the stone in the hat, but Cowdery is saying it's the spectacles.
Right.
Okay, so why does Cowdery say it's the spectacles? Because in truth, everyone saw him. I mean, Emma says stone in hat while she was a scribe.
Mm.
She saw Oliver Cowdery with this as scribe. She moved. She was working in the same room that Cowdery and Joseph were working in, and she said that the spectacles, the Urim and Thummim or whatever, were not used after the loss of the 116 pages.
Emma says that.
Yeah, in a letter to Emma Pilgrim.
Hmm.
All these documents are in my 5 volumes of documents.
Check
So
those out.
there's a section in volume 1 just of all the statements Emma made on this early Mormon origins. There's a section for Joseph Smith, section for Emma, section for William Smith, a section for Lucy Smith, Joseph Smith Sr. You know, so every statement I could find of these people are put are organized in these books.
Yeah.
So I wanted to know everything before I commented on it. But um, so what about what's the spectacle? Why is Cowdery saying the spectacles? He says the spectacles uh, in the Messenger and Advocate, calls them interpreters, as the Nephites call them interpreters. He says that when he comes back in the church and he's rebaptized, he gives a statement, talks about being there and receiving the priesthood, and and Joseph Smith translating using these interpreters. So,
Could that be
and Joseph Smith
interchangeable for
says,
the seer stone? Like referring to the
well,
Urim and Thummim or the
oh,
interpreters? Could that?
Urim Thummim was used as a synonym for any seer stone.
Hmm.
Okay, but there was a reason. Just Oliver Cowdery is actually repeating the official storyline. Okay, and the storyline started with the 1830 trial of Joseph Smith in Colesville, and the Abraham W. Benton, who lived in South Bainbridge. Well, so they let him off in 1826, and when Joseph Smith came back into the area as a Mormon prophet, and the story was going around that the Book of Mormon was translated by the same means. This means he didn't give it up, right?
Yeah. Same
Like
method.
yeah, like see, he's using the same method. He didn't give it up.
Was that
Uh,
Isaac Hale's sort of issue with Joseph, that he was doing pretty much the same thing?
yeah, as money digging, he goes, oh, I can't see any difference between the two things, right?
Aye.
He's pretty much doing the same thing. So that's why Isaac Hale was upset. Um, but in the 1830 trial, they wanted to retry him in South Bainbridge on the same charge, but Joe Smith pled statutes of limitations, which was more than 3 years had passed. So he beat that. And so he was rearrested immediately afterwards and brought to Colesville. So Colesville hadn't tried him. And he was doing this money digging in Colesville also on the property of Joseph Knight Sr. and along the Susquehanna River in that area. So Colesville could have a whack at it because it hadn't tried him before, and the statutes of limitations theoretically won't work. But he did try it, but they said, well, you have it hasn't been 3 years because you were using the stone to translate the Book of Mormon, even though it wasn't in their jurisdiction, But that's what they tried to do. Of course, he escaped this. He escaped the charge anyway. They actually physically escaped out the window. Okay.
He fled.
Yeah. After
Right.
in the Colesville thing, that they left out the window and they had to run and walk and run and whatever. And later in life, Joe Smith said that's where the Peter, James, and John, it sounds like anyway, that's what he was describing when he gave Albert Cowdery a blessing, and then Peter, James, and John, 3 angels came anyway.
Right.
But that Joe Smith named later, Peter, James, and John. So Benton says that Albert Cowdery got on the witness stand and said, more or less, Joe Smith translated the Book of Mormon with the instrument that was found with the plates, these spectacles, and it wasn't the seer stone.
Does he explicitly say not with the seer stone, or does he just say it was okay?
No, he just says it was. Well, Benton says he couldn't see any difference between these spectacles and the seer stone. They had the same properties. They evidently had the same properties. He words it in kind of a snide way of saying, well, the Cowdery got on the witness stand and said this, and that seemed to be just the very same thing. It had the same properties as the seer stone did, evidently. But so that's what that's the count that he gives. So it would be beneficial at that time to make that distinction. It's not true because, like Emma said, she was around a lot. She said the spectacles were not used after the loss of 116 pages, and Cowdery never worked on the 116 pages. It all happened months and months after the loss of the 116 pages that Cowdery came. So according to Emma, there was no spectacles anywhere. And so it's more likely than all these people lying, or less likely that all these people are lying, and more likely that they're telling the truth than to believe the official history of the church, that it was this Urim and Thummim. That Joseph Smith kept saying Urim and Thummim. He never described what this Urim and Thummim was, except the once that it was. He only implies that it was used by saying that the stones were what ancients called Urim and Thummim, that the angel talked to him about it, right? And that they were preserved for the specific purpose of translating the record. Then when he mentions Urim and Thummim, you assume he's talking about the same thing.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Or that he used, since he only says they were preserved with them, you know, and they were preserved to translate the record with. So you assume that that happened. This is exactly that assumption there is exactly what newspaper men made, the assumption newspaper uh, men made when they were interviewing Martin Harris. And Martin Harris would say, well, with the plates were found these spectacles. And then he says, and Joseph Smith would be translating with his face in the hat. So they would assume that this instrument's in the hat, right? Because, well, what could be in the hat? It's obvious. Even if he said he put the stone in the hat, they would remember that the spectacles have been preserved for the purpose of translating. So what else would he have put in the hat?
Right.
You know, so people that were on the outside that didn't know all the nuances and and interviewed Harris and then later went and wrote about it obviously got confused
Yeah.
about
Just
what
thought
was
it was the Urim and Thummim when it was really the
Urim and
seer
Thummim.
stone.
Emma said that Joe Smith didn't put the Urim and Thummim in the hat. Harris took the seer stone out of the hat. They
Hmm.
had the seer stone. Emma
Yeah.
said the seer stone's the only thing it's used. Everyone except Oliver Cowdery and these newspaper men, you know,
And
said
Emma's she's a credible witness. Like, what motivation would she have to
of
lie about
changing
that?
it.
Yeah, especially when she's still putting forward a faithful view of the translation.
She
It's
she doesn't see it as a problem.
no, no, it's still
So
miraculous.
if anything, she would have said it was the Urim and Thummim. If she
Hmm.
wanted to lie, why would she lie and change it to the seer stone?
Yeah, yeah.
What?
No, it doesn't
Why?
make sense.
There's no motivation for any of these guys to try to unchristianize the story.
Hmm.
You know, they're highly motivated to say it was he put the Urim and Thummim, the spectacles on or in the hat, or he was behind the curtain, anything but the seer stone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So but that's what they saw, and they didn't see anything wrong with it.
No,
That they had no reason to hide the seer stone unless they they would be attacked by some Orthodox Christians, you know.
and we know in
But
Joseph Smith's history, he's not forthright about his role as like a seer or a treasure seer. He makes it seem like he's just a digger. And then when we talked about Doctrine and Covenants 8, how it was the gift of the rod or the rod of nature, which is later changed to the gift of iron. So sort of covering or not emphasizing
yeah,
the magical part of it.
so
So
that happened. That
mhm,
happened when Joe
you,
Smith, in the mid 30s, there was a huge transition period of the concept of authority. What's authority? The early story of the coming forth of the Book of Mormon, his early account, he took the magic, he sanitized the magic out of it, made it more mainstream sounding, and made the angel not a spirit, and um, was a resurrected being, made a point of that.
mhm,
Um, he discarded using the seer stone altogether, which David Whitmer thought was a mistake. You know, that was a mistake to go it alone. You know, that's where he started going
getting deceived or
well, being influenced by Sidney Rigdon.
uh
You know, he was under the influence of Sidney Rigdon, the great theologian, and compared to him. And if some revelations are of men, right? Some revelations are of men. Um, that's how Joseph Smith got off the track with the high priesthood, with publishing his revelations, with making himself the president of the church, you know, polygamy later on. So he explained that as Joseph Smith giving up the stone would have kept him on the straight and narrow, and he would have been less confused with his own thoughts.
Right. Yeah. Okay, important point. I think so. A final question or two I have before we close. I've heard sort of a sort of apologetic or faithful interpretation that Joseph Smith, he really did have this gift as a seer. Don't know exactly when it started. I think I've heard one person point to maybe at the first vision. Perhaps that's when he received the gift. But anyway, that people believed he had this gift to find lost objects. He was a
Well,
seer,
the
but
Smith
he
would say he
was.
was born that way.
That's what the Smiths claim.
Yeah, yeah, he had this gift.
Uh-huh.
I
So
mean,
he's born with it.
there's this one story uh, that back he was born with a veil over his face.
Yes, I've heard that account.
Yeah. So, and that's part of the like afterbirth or
Hmm.
amniotic membrane, that some babies that are born with it over their face are gifted. They're gifted as seers, uh, and it's a good omen. And
Right.
uh, so
So he
some
was
people actually,
born a seer.
people in the 19th century and before would actually save these things and dry them out, and they would be handed down as special objects.
Hmm.
And it's part of the magic worldview. And anyway, this was mentioned by the Green Mountain Boys, I believe it was in that source, that pamphlet from 1844, something like that. Anyway, so but the Smith family had a tradition that some great person would be born in their line. uh, it was actually transformed a little bit retrospectively to apply more, it fit better with what Joe Smith eventually became. But there was, Aziel Smith said something like, somebody great is going to be born in my lineage that is going to change things, become great and change maybe the religious world. He didn't say restore the true church or anything like that.
Mm.
But he was expecting something great. Lucy Smith was expecting something great to happen in her family. It was believed, according to some of the neighbors, she used to say these things about Alvin. But when Alvin died, it kind of got transferred to Joseph.
Right.
And Joseph followed in Joseph Smith Sr.'s steps in a way, becoming the interpreter of dreams. He was named Joseph Jr.,
Hmm.
and he was the interpreter of his father's dreams. And when Joseph Smith founded the church, Joseph Smith is reported by Abner Cole as saying that his visions, have been fulfilled in his son.
Right. Okay.
So they this Joseph Smith being gifted, being special, probably happened early. He was hit. I believe his leg operation uh, made the family extra special attentive to Joseph.
Right.
Alvin and Hiram,
Almost more special attention.
yeah, were bonded to Joseph particularly, and
Right.
um, but Joseph inherited his father's gifts, and that's all Joseph Smith Sr. really had to offer, hand down. And Joseph Smith picked that mantle up, and he actually propped his father up, gave him dignity, and
Mm.
um, defended his father's dreams against Lucy Smith, who joined the Presbyterian Church. You know, and more or less, you know, it seemed like she was not following her husband's dreams that said that all the churches were corrupt and false. And even Joseph Smith Jr. had told her, you can join the Presbyterian Church, but you don't know their spirits. That even Deacon Jessup, will scruple not to give a penny to a starving widow, which Lucy said actually came true later on. So their sights were on Joseph,
Yeah.
even before the first vision's 14 years old, or 15, whichever it was. I don't think they paid much attention to it
There doesn't seem to be much talk about it
by the reaction, which was nothing. There was no reaction. Lucy joined the Presbyterian Church. So I'm sure he had a born again experience, but it was just a born again experience. And, that's good, but it has nothing to do with a true or false church or anything. It has to do with whether there's a real Jesus. And I'm sure Lucy was happy that Joseph believed in Jesus and didn't follow Joseph Sr.'s path, being leaning towards universalism and Unitarianism. But it didn't say anything particularly about true and false churches. But he did conclude when in 1820 he was verifying both parents' views about the religious world. They both rejected the religious world, didn't baptize their children in any church. And as Joseph Smith tells it in 1832, it confirmed his belief that there was no true church on earth. And it wasn't about authority or anything like that. It was more about following, being
forgiven of his sins,
not having the traditions of men mingled with God, the Bible and things. So they all had things that were non-biblical. Sort of like Alexander Campbell rejected all of them because he said nothing but the Bible, right? Nothing but the Bible. Even you can't even have an organ. It's sort of like this is what extreme fundamentalists. The Bible doesn't mention an organ, so you can't have organs when you're singing. Anyway,
right?
So Joseph Smith agreed with both parents that the true church wasn't, or the true doctrines and principles of Christ were not taught in churches. And they kind of were anti-institutional that way. And a lot of Americans were too, and still are actually. So because there was no true church to go to, that was his dilemma. How do I get saved if they're all wrong? What about my salvation? He wasn't praying in the 1832 account, okay?
About which church to join.
He wasn't praying about which church to join. He was praying, how can I be saved if they're all wrong?
Because he says that he came to the conclusion from studying the scriptures there's no true denomination.
Just like his parents.
Yeah.
Just his parents had the Lord. Same conclusion.
Yeah.
Until Alvin's death. Alvin's death, that changed everything. But
we should do another discussion at some point on the first vision. Yeah, I don't want to get into it in this one, but I think
this thought. This thought that Jesus appears and says, all those who believe in me are saved. And he confirmed the belief that there is no true church. There's none doeth good, no, not one.
Yeah.
And but he's saved through faith, not to worry. So that was the message he received. I think that's closer, since it's 1832. It's closer. There's less institutional pressure on or ideas that he has about priesthood yet.
It's his own personal journal.
Remember, there's no angelic ordination no hard and fast priesthood concept, no institution. There's nothing about a true church. They're true because they have the Spirit, okay? Not because they have the priesthood, right?
Mm.
Not because they have this angelic ordination and they have the priesthood and nobody else does. They have the priesthood because they have the Spirit and they have revelation. But there's always been, the true church was always there. There wasn't like a complete apostasy. The true church was the invisible church, the invisible saints, the people among scattered. And this is the Puritan concept of gathering the pure into one church, keeping the wicked out, finding the invisible church and making the invisible church visible. That's a whole nother thing. And Hiram even mentions it one time about the invisible saints becoming visible. And so that concept, the Puritan concept, was in the early church. It wasn't an institution, perpetuation of, or reestablishment or restoration of an institution at first.
Yeah.
So in 1832, it's not this hard and fast restoration concept. So the first vision could be you're saved through faith in Jesus that saved you. You don't need a church at that time anyway.
Yeah.
It isn't until after the priesthood and Mormonism becomes exclusive, the only true and living church, kind of concept.
Yeah. All the other churches, like their creeds are an abomination, their professors are corrupt. He's told to join all the other churches. In the 1838 account, that's the message he's given by the Lord.
So it becomes the introduction of angelic ordination and priesthood concept of unbroken chain and all that changes the Mormonism in a certain way of being more Catholic and less Protestant, right? So in the beginning, and as it was first developing, it was more Protestant oriented, and as time
more
went
about
on,
the spiritual gifts and charismatic.
And as time went on, it became more and more institutional, and would be more akin to Catholicism in a way of legalisms and priesthood and authority and all that kind of stuff.
Gotcha.
You had to have an unbroken chain to somebody had indisputable truth or authority.
Right. Very good.
Anyway,
one last question and then we'll wrap up. So I think I was going to say this earlier. So some apologists, they would believe, they would take a faithful perspective that Joe Smith really was a seer. He did have this gift. People believed that he had this gift. And some people claim that it did work, but in treasure digging, they never found the treasure. I think there's also an account, it might be Alva Hale, correct me if I'm getting this wrong, who says that Joseph apparently told him that peeping in stones or, pretending to see treasure was all sort of damn nonsense, but that he believed the gift of being a seer is a gift from God. Do you believe Joseph Smith was being sort of like sincere there? Like, do you think he sort of realized, what, all this treasure digging stuff is all fraudulent. I've been deceived, but he still believed that he was a seer and that he had this gift and that he used it when he was translating the Book of Mormon.
I can't remember the exact words of the Hale thing, but he sometimes told people that the treasure seeing, not translating, the treasure seeing was he couldn't see anything. Or he even told Peter Ingersoll, the neighbor directly to the north of them in Manchester, he was on the Palmyra side in that same cabin they used to live in. that there was nothing in the box except sand. But why would he tell people? Some people actually take that seriously, and I don't. I think he's just trying to get them off his scent. He's trying to say, look, I don't have, there's no plates. There's no sense in breaking into my house. I'm just trying to have fun with my family, like, so don't tell anybody, wink, wink, right? But I don't have any plates. It's
Right.
just sand in the box.
Right. So would you see that
So the
quote
same
as
thing he told Peter Ingersoll, the same guy, on the way to Peter Ingersoll went down with Joseph and Emma, or he also went down and vouched for Joseph Smith, uh, of being a good guy and all that, and you should let Emma marry Joseph. But and then they did some treasure seeing in the area again. But
wasn't he the one that claimed that Joseph said to Isaac that he could never see in the stone all along?
yeah,
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 that was him. Okay.
yeah. So yeah, Peter Ingersoll. Well, Joseph Smith, he made those statements to get for people to stop persecuting him. You know, no, like, or not. Peter Ingersoll had the problem of trying to use Joseph Smith. These people all wanted to use him treasure digging. He's saying, no, I don't want to do that anymore, kind of a thing.
Hmm.
Um, but he did. He made these like confessions. Some people, some people could be not telling the truth about it, but also you could see Joe Smith saying it like, yeah, well, if you tell anybody, I'll deny it. It's just me and you here, you know. So he might have did that to get the money diggers off his case. Um, he might be repenting from being a treasure seer.
That's what I was thinking as well. Maybe it's him repenting, like maybe he feels like he
Uh,
was misusing his gift in a way to earn money or you know to
well,
be
he
a
was
bit
doing
greedy.
yeah, he was doing it with the wrong intent.
Wrong intent.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
I think
now
maybe
he's doing it
people like
for a
Richard
good
Bushman
cause.
might hold that view that Joseph Smith was maybe testing his spiritual powers and maybe misusing it at the time, and then he repents, and then he's then worthy to obtain the plates, and but he still had this gift, which I suppose you can still hold that interpretation as a believer, even if you're aware of the history. You don't necessarily have to come to the conclusion, therefore Joseph Smith was a fraud or a false prophet. We can't believe his claims of visions or the Book of Mormon translation.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also a very valid interpretation that people who don't believe are critics that you know don't believe his accounts of the Book of Mormon translation and his visions and such. But I think that's probably the apologetic argument that I've
Well,
heard
so
to explain it.
yeah, so he to me they're just props. He knows there's no plates, in my view. He knows there's no plates in the cloth, but he has to convince people, and it's for their own good that he convinces them they'll believe in the true revelations that he gets. If he were just to put out a revelation, and so many other prophets did that, he wasn't the only one giving out revelations. And if he just did that, he'd have fewer followers. He'd be less powerful as a prophet and
It
less convinced.
strengthens faith and confidence in him.
Well, he learned how to build confidence as a seer. That's the thing he learned. He
Mhm.
wasn't learning spiritual, how to translate plates by being a treasure seer. He was learning how to build confidence in people, even though he would actually have no evidence or proof, or even success. I mean, when you look at what Joseph Smith predicted, he would establish Zion, and Zion would be established in this generation, and the whole thing fell, and the Gentiles had power over him and ruined the whole plan. There's no Zion even today. It was his mission was to convert the Indians and build Zion, and he didn't do any of that. And so his main mission, and the book that the Book of Mormon was designed to do, failed. He it's total, but still he still gathered followers. There's so many other revelations that failed here and there. that were wrong that he had to explain away, about God decreeing decrees and then revoking decrees, you know.
Mm. So that is sort of like conditional um, promises or
Well, God
prophecies.
would know that it wouldn't come to pass. When he
Hmm.
put two missionaries together and sent them on missions, and then one didn't go, and then he had to revoke that, and then take that person and give him a whole another different job altogether. I mean, God would have known all that stuff.
Hmm.
And so there was that. People started questioning, and he came out with answers like, well, God gives a job for you to do and then changes his mind, and that's supposed to be bad, is what the revelation after that says. Like, God can make decrees and revoke decrees. He can do whatever he wants.
Yeah, he's God.
But is there still that problem of, didn't he know the future? Didn't he know
Yeah,
the guy was going to apostatize, and that you would have to give this guy a different job because there was another thing that was more important than that mission to come along? And
I guess there's scriptures that say God doesn't change his mind. Isn't D&C in Doctrine and Covenants 3 says he doesn't turn from the right hand to the left, you know?
well, he did. And right, he did. There was no shadow of turning. Well, there was in Joseph Smith's revelations.
Mm,
So there's things like that. There's more. There's that, and there are a bunch of other things. But Joseph Smith has a lot of failures along the way, but yet gathers more and more followers. You know, so he that was his gift, and he sold God to the people around him like no one else could. He saved people that some of them would not have been saved otherwise, and
yeah.
that's especially his father. His father was a Universalist, drunk and um, at odds with the family, and uh, he saved him. And when Joseph Smith baptized him on April 6th, 1830, he had a huge emotional response to that. And Lucy Smith and Joseph Knight Sr. was there. Both of them described Joseph Smith becoming overwhelmed with emotions by seeing his father baptized. Well, that was his main goal.
Yeah,
Had
in
been
your view, it was to unite the family.
have been realized. Well,
Yeah.
the father was the stumbling block to the whole thing, and there was no way to reach him. He had these revelations. He wouldn't join the Presbyterian Church because he had these revelations, these visions that said all the churches were wrong. Plus, the minister made a huge mistake by saying Alvin had gone to hell. So that was like a non-starter right there. But Joseph Smith was able to get the whole family into one church and save Alvin.
Wow. Yeah.
Alvin's not going to hell anymore. Well, right there in Mosiah, when he was dictating that probably to Emma about the babies, there's it says right in the same passage, those who die without the law are also saved.
In the revelation in the Doctrine and Covenants that those who die without this gospel who would have received it will be heirs to the celestial kingdom of God, something like that.
Well, D&C 76, yeah, that's one way. Another way was baptism for the dead that came along later in 1840, and they baptized Alvin for the dead.
Hmm.
And then he had that 1836 revelation, remember, where he sees Alvin in the celestial kingdom and wondered how he could get there because he
Yeah, I think
was
that's the one I was referring
died.
to. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
died before the gospel was restored. And
Yeah. Yeah.
then it says, yeah, they're judged according to the desires of their heart, what they would have done if they had heard it.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's that. Joseph saves Alvin,
Hmm.
and they're all in the same church, mother and father united together. Um, so anyway,
Alrighty. Anyway, well, Dan, it's been a pleasure. It's been awesome and exhausting at the same time
yeah,
having this discussion, but I've loved it. I've been so absorbed. And I hope the listeners who have kept up with us, have really enjoyed it as well. Appreciate, your work, your scholarship, your knowledge of these documents. It can be quite confusing, especially for somebody who's first, trying to figure things out. And I think this dialogue, you've really been able to be thorough and go in depth while following, like a chronology at times. And hopefully this will be helpful to people. And again, check out Dan Vogel, his YouTube channel. Check out his videos there and check out his books. Joseph Smith, The Making of the Prophet, an 8-volume series you have in, was it the early history of the church? I'll put the link in
My
the description.
8-volume thing is the history of Joseph Smith and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Yep.
A source and text critical edition.
Awesome.
So it shows all the changes that were made throughout all the various editions from the manuscripts. The way that the version that most people read is my basic text. Then I show where in footnotes, and I use bold sometimes. I show what the original manuscripts read before it was published, and then I show changes that were made by B.H. Roberts after that. Then I go to the original sources that the historians used and show changes between any of those manuscripts that are behind the history of the church. From the original sources, I show if there were changes made from the original sources to that official history.
Awesome. Great stuff. And
thousands of footnotes.
So yeah, so much research and documents in there. Amazing. So yeah, thanks so much, Dan, again for your time having this discussion. I've really enjoyed it and benefited from it. It's been really good meeting you in person and getting to know you a little bit.
Good to know you too, Stephen.
Yeah. And hopefully we can have more discussions in the future.
Yeah,
it's good to have these dialogues. I think there needs to be more.
If there's questions or apologetic things, what things apologists say that you might want to work through, discuss about, get more nuanced and in depth of all the problems that can arise. Because Mormonism takes in everything.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack. But I love hearing both sides. So if anyone wanted to come on, so almost, do a response or want to, have a meeting with me after this video, I would invite them. I'm open to hearing both, critical perspectives, faithful historians. I'm hoping to have an interview with Brian Hale soon, and I think it's good people to hear both sides. I think
Brian's very good on his topic.
Yes, he is. Yeah.
He has two main topics: polygamy and the Book of Mormon.
Yes. Yeah. I think it'll be polygamy.
And Book of Mormon's my topic now. When I'm done with this book, I'm going to focus on the Book of Mormon.
Yeah.
And we'll be dealing with some things.
That would be an interesting debate, wouldn't it?
Brian Hales has written on the topic.
Yeah.
So it's up in the future coming up. But I'm more focused on trying to describe what happened.
Yes.
Rather than answering apologists.
Yeah.
So I want to map out, give all the information to everybody of how it was written, how the chronology of what parts were written when. That's one of my things. I talk about anti-Masonry in the Book of Mormon, universalism in the Book of Mormon, and the family history of Joseph Smith, I think, is reflected in it, and things like that. 19th century stuff that some people think, no matter what, even if it is a translation of an ancient document, would influence Joseph Smith's translation if you have a loose translation theory.
Yes.
Rather than, a word for word.
Yeah.
Some apologists have, like what Blake Ostler said, was an expansionist theory, where there's a basic ancient text that Joseph Smith expanded on.
Yeah.
So if the Book of Mormon were written specifically to the 19th century first readers, you would expect for it to be molded around that.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a whole other topic, isn't it? The tight versus loose
Yes.
translation theory. But I would love see if we could get you and Brian Hales to have a discussion slash
Yeah.
debate, obviously a friendly debate
Yeah.
on the book.
Yeah.
That would
We
be a
have
good interview.
debated. We have debated on Facebook in passing.
Yeah.
I like to actually be more careful and present it, my view, like in my videos on my channel on YouTube,
Hmm.
where I can lay it out very clearly, certain topics. And I'm still working out some things.
That's
So I can't
good.
answer everything Brian brings up yet.
Oh, I respect you on that. It's good that you also have that
Yeah.
respect
Well,
for certain
I'm
apologists and
growing all the time. That's why I'm still interested in this,
yeah,
because I
ever
don't have
learning.
all the answers really. And so it holds fascination for me because I don't have all the answers and I'm still discovering things and working things out.
And I'm sure that's probably your primary motivation
And the
for
apologists sometimes help me.
yeah, and that's
So
good.
I don't see them as enemies really.
No, and I feel like there can
Some
be a
some
bit too
uh,
much of a
yeah.
divide sometimes
Some
between
critics just can't stand apologists,
no.
but
It can create a
I
big
don't know.
divide. I think there's too much ad hominem. There's too much us versus them. Which side are you on? And even for people who are in the church and those who lead, not just critics and apologists, there can be this big divide. And even if we disagree, draw different conclusions, if we can just have dialogue and understand each other and at least have more empathy and more respect, we don't have to agree. We can draw our own conclusions. We can
Well,
believe what we want to
I
believe.
found that the ones that demonize each other the most are the ones that know the least on both sides. On both
Yeah,
sides. The
yeah,
ones that know the most are more in the center and can communicate much better with each other.
yeah,
And there is a group that have politicized Mormon apologetics. They're very politicized and political about it. Those are like polemicists that just want to win debates, not
yeah.
find out what happened.
I'm not
I want
for
to
that
find out
because
what
we
happened.
we should all be out for wanting to know the truth, and
Yeah, I want to
it's not
find out
about
what happened.
yeah, it's not about being right or wrong or holding your position, even if it's the wrong one or the weaker one. Like you should be open to new evidence and new truth. Uh,
Well, some people think that any answer is an answer. They throw out anything weak thing. They just throw anything at it, uh, and they're trying to win some kind of political point,
mhm.
not a historical point. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
they're not really trying to find out what happened. They're trying
yeah,
to answer critics or apologists or whatever. That's
yeah,
where it's very polemic or
yes.
political over here. And I'm with Mike Quinn. Mike Quinn was an apologist, and we got along just fine. Um, because he said he was an honest apologist,
Yeah,
where he can admit that, well, we don't have an answer for that part, or that is a stronger argument, that is a weaker, being less personal about it too. Um, and so, yeah, he said he's an apologist. He had no problem being called an apologist, but he called some others that were more critical, even of him, a believer,
yeah,
uh, as being polemical, being polemicist, meaning they want to win the debate,
yeah.
you know?
And
And
it just you can be attacking the person rather than their argument. And I don't like that. And even whenever I was doing my teacher training this year, we had a debate week at school, and some of the fundamentals of a debate when we were going through it was you don't attack the person, you just stick to the evidence and their arguments, and there should be respect. And yeah, I think I appreciate your tone in the way that you've just kind of like presented the history, you've talked through the documents. Obviously, you've shared your interpretation as well, your view
yeah,
and your beliefs, which
well, you
is
have to
fair, it's
connect some
valid.
of the dots.
Yeah, yeah.
That history isn't created to answer all of our questions.
Hmm.
There are gaps. That's what makes it so difficult. And
Yes.
So what you're not looking, you'll never be able to know that you got the past created accurately.
Yeah, 100%.
Because like in science, you can verify your theory and stuff, but in history, you can't
No.
unless you have a time machine.
Yeah.
So what you can do is find what probably happened, what is the most likely. You try to find which is the most defensible position, the
Hmm.
position that can be defended the easiest,
Yes.
or even with, if you go to Occam's razor, the one that has the least amount of parts to it. You know what I mean? Like to hold it together,
Sort of like the most logical,
the less holes to
rational.
apply, you
Yeah.
know?
At least conjecture. Awesome.
The fewer holes, that if you have like the reverse translation theory that we talked about earlier with the Book of Abraham, starts bringing up other problems. Well, if it were Book of Abraham was translated first, and then the alphabets and grammar is second, then it creates this problem or that problem, and then you got to create another theory to answer that, and then you go, but that has a problem, and you create another theory to hold that up, and you keep
Yeah.
on, it's that's how Occam's razor. That's the benefit of it, is that the one that you have to the least has the least qualifications,
Hmm.
and you have to keep mending problems. Like every piece of evidence that you discover has to be explained away rather than adopted into the theory.
Yeah.
Oh, that's another piece of evidence that fits here. So when you find somebody that's constantly, evidence is not a good, finding new evidence is not a good day, then their theories are in trouble. They're not
Right.
they're not bearing fruit.
Yes, because further evidence should strengthen their position if it's
Yeah,
the correct one. Yeah,
right.
that's awesome. Right, I've loved having you
Yeah,
having this conversation with you. Loved having you on. Hopefully, we can have future
sure.
conversations. Everyone go check out his books and his YouTube channel. Thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel, Mormonism with the Murph. I'm hoping to do more video series on different topics with church history and the truth claims, and to get more historians like Dan to come on and have a dialogue. If you've enjoyed this, please share this video, like, and subscribe. Thanks so much, Dan.
You bet.